Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another Touchpoint Group Banking App Insight session. And we're going to be looking at the entire UK market for the month of January. And due to popular demand and lots of interested people reaching out, we are combining the data sets. So we're going to get a look across everything when we move into benchmarking. But first of all, we're going to have a look at the main UK banks, and in particular, we're going to be looking at NatWest Bank and the strides that they've made to nearly topple the market leaders in there. Before we move into the challenger banks, have a little look at that. And Tony, Patrick, you have been doing some great work looking at the benchmarks for some of the different areas in the apps across the entire UK market.
That's right, Glenn. So looking at the groups we have here, the UK banks and UK challengers, but again, as you said, Glenn, let's compare these side by side and see how well they're doing against each other. So first of all, I'd like to just jump in and have a look at what we saw at the end of last year, just for some context, so we can have a base to see actually what's the movement been like into January. And so what we can see here is there's a few leaders sitting there, for example, like Starling and Lloyds sitting at the top there, sitting above 4 consistently, and they're always ranking 1 and 2. We saw Barclays soften at the end of last year, so let's see how they've gone in January. And a few others like Atom Bank does tend to move around, and Santander has had a sort of a softening recently, but there's some movements we're seeing as well. Like, for example, HSBC is that big mover mid-year, and you can see that they've maintained that movement up into clearly near 4, but their rank hasn't actually improved that much. They need to actually do that next level to get up a bit. So let's move in and have a look at these sort of main banks here. And what I'll do, I'll put HSBC back in just so we can see that movement we had. And it's good to clear that away so our scale can get back to normal. But one of the things we can see here is they've hit that level of around 3.75 and just slightly above sometimes, but they haven't gone to that next level up, which is hitting that 4 consistently. So I'll move that away just so we can see what else is going on. So one of the things we can see is Santander has made that jump from July. We had some issues in July. That's picked up nicely, but again, they need to actually improve to the next level to get above that 4, the same as HSBC. But one of the big movers is NatWest. And we can see there it actually is bumping up against Lloyds very, very closely. And in fact, in January, it's basically neck and neck. And so what we can say then is NatWest has done something in November to make a massive change, to actually improve things up. So let's have a look at what they've actually done, or what the outcome of what they've done is. So what I can see here now, what we're looking at here is our SURF analysis, covering off these 4 key areas of security and authentication, usability, reliability, and functionality. So when we're looking at these things, these are all pain points. These are all problems. So we want to get the frequency down as low as possible. And we can see with security and authentication, so logging in and things like that, we can see that the most recent 3 months from the November to January, we can see here that NatWest has done very well at 2.8%. So very, very low numbers in terms of that area there. And that's halved from what it was in the 3 months prior to that. So logging in is really good. Let's look at reliability. That's also dropped away in terms, which is really good. They've actually got reliability under more control in that area. So across the board, some good improvements. But even with that improvement, how does it compare to Lloyds? So let's have a quick look at that. So Lloyds is at the top there. Now we saw, so NatWest is sitting with this authentication piece at 2.8%. Lloyds is 2.4, pretty much neck and neck, not too much different there. So they're doing very well in that sense. Reliability is also under control at around 7%. So that's really good. So customers can actually get through and actually use the app as it was intended, rather than things breaking down, which is great. But there are 2 areas where we can see NatWest has more issues than Lloyds. So usability issues. And if I jump in here and look at usability on the right panel here, you can see that there's a few things. It's impossible to log in using the app. It's hard to use the app. There's things that are slow. It's difficult to use, etc. So There's a few other things that sort of seem cumbersome or things like that. Obviously, we could drill into those, but we're just looking from a higher level from this perspective. But also there's some functionality things that can be improved as well. But to give you context about how things are going here, if I have a look at this from a full market perspective and benchmark this by bank, I can see that that NatWest is actually doing very well. So let's just do it across all of these banks. And so what I can see in here, if I just remove the filter for NatWest, just looking at usability, even though it's at 8.5%, which is reasonably low, it's doing very well compared to others. Still in that top, the top. When I say top, it's the ones with the lowest frequency here are the best. So I can see there NatWest at 8.5 is doing very well compared to the best, which is actually Lloyds in this case. And we can see others in that range as well. So very positive there, but still that incremental improvement is going to make the difference. Now, one of the things also we can look at is jumping across and having a look at how well they're doing on each of the journeys. So first of all, let's compare NatWest to Lloyds, because Lloyds, again, they're competing at the top at the moment, and this is across that past quarter, so those past 3 months. And this is very interesting. We can see that NatWest is actually doing better on each of these journeys. So when I say journeys, it's things like depositing a check, monitoring account activity, transferring between accounts, checking your account balance, all the basic stuff from moving money to just checking your balance, that an app should be doing very well. And you can see there that NatWest is actually performing better than Lloyds. So if Lloyds can get those usability and functionality things a notch higher, they could actually leap ahead of Lloyds. It's a very positive position for NatWest to be in. And also a nice benchmark piece. I'm just looking at Lloyds for the moment. Let's compare NatWest to the total market. And we can see there, they leap ahead even further. So that their position is very strong in terms of the way these particular journeys are actually working for customers. So very positive for NatWest. So another look here and what NatWest is up to. This is the app release cycle. And we can see here that in November, this is where we picked up. So version 7.24 is where all the magic happened for NatWest. They actually had a massive uplift in their score compared to previous periods. And they've actually flowed that on to the release 7.25. So NatWest need to be careful. They make sure they understand what the magic is inside here, which we can see, and they make sure they maintain that and improve the areas that are going to make that difference. So a very positive position for NatWest to be in, and we expect them to at least maintain or improve from where they are at the moment. So let's have a look at the challenges briefly, and then we'll do some global comparisons. So one of our, not quite the global leader, that's out of the US with US Bank, but Starling is sitting consistently at 4.7, 4.6, very strong and consistent across the year, which is why it is ranked number 1 in the UK. So this is just a reflection on what happened up to the end of last year. Some other movements, for example, we can see here, we see NatWest, that's that movement we saw, that movement up, 4.5, 4.5. So lots of positive movement for them. Let's have a look, though, at what the scores show us. So what I've got here is actually the scores across time. I might just remove a couple of these. Like Moniz is having trouble getting above 3. It's consistently down there, but let's just get our scale in order here. One of the things we can look at is just briefly where Lloyds sits compared to these challenger banks. So near the top there, and we see that Starling is sitting ahead of them. So Starling is actually doing very well right at the top there, but very closely behind the likes of Lloyds and also, of course, NatWest, which we've just looked at. So that's interesting where that fits in. But let's have a look at some global comparisons across all of these banks we've been covering. So I'm switching here to this SURF analysis, which is looking at these 4 key areas. And again, here is where we want these scores to be as low as possible. These are all pain points. So first of all, I'd like to look at this area of security and authentication. So just move this chart from the top away. So what I can see here is that 2.5% is the average across this particular period in January. But let's look on the right here about what's going on. I can see that Starling is doing the best. So only 0.6% of the conversation for Starling is around security and authentication. So very limited login issues. So customers are getting into the app consistently and very easily. But we can see here the likes of Lloyds is 2.4. We see NatWest is 3. So that level of 3 and below looks like a good benchmark to actually be sitting at. If you're above that, you need to have a good look at what you're doing with your authentication piece. What about reliability? Where is that sitting? So this is just looking at January, by the way. What I can see here is that we've got Starling, which is, of course, at the top in terms of the overall score, but their reliability is really, really strong. So customers can use the app as it was intended without having these issues coming through. So only around 4% having issues as compared to others in here, which getting above 10%, you started to get into a territory where customers are having a negative experience here as compared to others. What I'll do now, though, is have a look at journeys. So again, in a similar position here, we can see the journeys across here in terms of the scores. Now this one here, of course, this is just looking at average score because this is positive and negative comments coming through. So what's the average score? The higher, the better. You want to actually get a really good high score on this one across all these, well, pretty much basic functionality you want to achieve in an app for banks. So let's have a look on the right here. I've got a very simple one about transferring between accounts. Very, very simple thing you should be able to do. We see Lloyds actually leading, so 4.3, which is why it does so well in that area there. Barclays sitting up there as well, Halifax. Starling can actually do some improvement there as well. They're sitting at number 5, but still they're very, very strong. So here it looks like pretty much getting anything 4 and above is going to do you well in this market. If I look at another very simple thing, paying bills, how well are each of these banks doing on the right here? So Barclays are again doing well there. NatWest we saw before was doing very well on a lot of these things, and Lloyds is also up there. So again, getting above 4 on these is the benchmark to actually show you're actually doing very well for your customers. So Glenn, it just shows that there's a lot to improve for every bank. Even if you're up near the top, there's still room to do one better.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're interested in getting a copy of these, having a look at where your bank stacks up and having a chat with us, feel free to reach out. We're more than happy to have a quick session with you and talk through what is possible with the software that we've got and the services that we offer. Thanks again, Tony, and we look forward to bringing you another Insight session next month.